Check out those roots. That's what happens in quarantine. Hi, everybody. It's been a while. Thank you all for joining this channel, even though, truthfully, I have no idea what I'm doing. So, here's the thing. I have Tourette's. I have Tourette's all of the time, right? It doesn't go away. But sometimes it's more noticeable. And more important than that, sometimes Tourette's gets me in weird, uncomfortable situations. 99% of the time I react well. 99% of the time I can find the humor. 99% of the time I remain a nice person. And then every now and again, I snap. So I thought I'd tell you a story of a day that I snapped. A day that maybe I didn't do exactly what I wish I had done. 2 summers ago, I woke up, I went to LaGuardia Airport, my home airport, for the first flight out of, I think it was like 32 flights for a tour. So it was the first leg of a full tour that was to be for a few weeks. And I get to the airport, and I get to my gate, fine. Here's the thing. When my Tourette's is more severe, I sometimes pre-board when they call for people to pre-board. I do this for a few reasons. One, if I'm able to get on the plane and into my window seat and curled up in a ball, then I'm comfortable, I can breathe, and I don't hit people around me with all of my Tourette's. 2, when my tics are worse from Tourette's, my movements and noises, and you put me confined in a line or in a group of people who are in my space, especially at 4'6", I get a little panicky, but also my Tourette's gets a little bit worse, and my hands fly, and sometimes I accidentally hit people or tap people or caress people or touch people, and people don't love that, especially if I get them in their man jewels. So sometimes I pre-board for other people's safety. So on this day, because it was a high anxiety day, first flight out of a ton of flights, when they called for pre-boarding, I went to go board. But here's the thing. If you look at me for a few seconds, you can't always tell that I have a disability. You can't always tell that I have Tourette's. Sometimes it's way more noticeable to me than to anybody else. And so I went to pre-board. And there was a woman in line for first class, and she yelled, "No, she's cutting! Get to the back of the line!" And I ignored her. And again she yelled, "What's wrong with you that you get to cut me in line?" This time, I realized she was talking to me, which up until that moment, I thought no way. No way would someone yell at somebody who's pre-boarding. I turned around and said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Unbelievable." So I replied as nicely as humanly possible, "Sometimes you can't tell that somebody has a disability just by looking at them." To which she started laughing and yelled, "Right, you just want to board early." So I took a deep breath and I let her know that I had a movement disorder, and she laughed in my face. And I again said, "I'm actually getting on this flight because I'm starting a tour where I'm going to talk about disabilities and being different and embracing what makes you, you. And again, you can't always tell that somebody has a disability just by looking at them." And she started to rally the people around her by yelling, "She's cutting! She's cutting!" And I looked at the gate agent and I was like, "Help! Help!" What? I didn't say it, but I was like, how are you saying nothing right now? And I will say that nobody started joining her in yelling. Nobody also stepped up and told this woman to shut her mouth. So at this point, she's trying to rally other people and she's yelling, "This woman's cutting. She just wants to go in front of us." And then she took out her camera and she started videotaping me. And that's where I lost my cool. I'll tell you another story of times in my life where people have videotaped me to laugh at my Tourette's or make fun of me. And in that moment, I lost my cool. And I did something that I wish I hadn't done, but I also felt like I had worked really hard to assume goodwill and be nice to this woman, and I lost my cool. And in that moment, I looked at her and I called her a bitch. And I said it loudly, and it came from a place within me that I sometimes wish didn't exist. And I got on board and I broke down crying, just sobbing, because I was frustrated and angry, and I was a little bit mad at myself that I had lost my cool in a way where I publicly called someone a 4-letter word, a 5-letter word. Hey, math. But halfway through the flight, it hit me that In that moment, I took something back. In that moment, she was publicly humiliating me. And while I try to have goodwill, and while I try to have patience, and while I try to be nice and turn these moments into teaching moments, in that moment, I needed to reclaim something because I felt this big. And we landed, and I had regained my composure. And then I went to the bathroom in the next airport, I think was Atlanta. And of course, she was there too. And I went up to her. Not something I would typically do, but I also kind of knew that, she probably didn't have a gun. We were in an airport. We all went through a safety detector, metal detector situation. So I went up to her and I said, "Are you the woman who tried to publicly humiliate me?" And she did not respond. And I said, "Are you the woman who would try to publicly humiliate somebody with a disability?" And she did not respond. And I said, "Excuse me." And she looked and said, "No, it wasn't me." Clearly it was her. Clearly it was her. And I said, "Good, because videotaping someone and yelling at someone for boarding early with a disability is a horrible thing to do. And I'd like to think you wouldn't ever publicly humiliate somebody like that." And I walked away. And in that moment, I felt like, okay, I may have lost my cool a few hours earlier, but in that moment, I hopefully taught her something. I hopefully taught her a message. And then I went and I performed at the summer camp that I was going to, and I had an incredible time. But at about midnight, I logged on my Facebook group. There's a Facebook group I'm in for people who fly way too often on Delta, way too often. And I told the story. And I said, I'm telling you this because so often in this group I've seen people say, "Look at how many people are pre-boarding, but none of them look like they have a disability." And I told the entire story, and I reminded everyone that, you are not the commissioner. You are not the ones who get to decide who has a valid disability and who doesn't. That's somebody's choice. That's somebody's own choice. And if someone is breaking the rules and they don't have something going on and they choose to board early, you're all going to the same place anyway. And maybe for that person, it's just lowering their anxiety. And my God, that's a reason to pre-board as well. I don't always look like I need to pre-board. And I just wanted those 1,000, whatever, how many years in that group, those few people to just remember that sometimes you can't tell, and to maybe be those people that when somebody does get yelled at or somebody is called out, they're the ones standing next to them. And a lot of people in the group actually did say, "Should I ever meet you or should this ever happen, you have my word that I will stand in solidarity, that I will stick up for you, that I will say something." And as much as that story sucks and it hurts, and I'm still angry with that woman, and I still sometimes look at her photo just so I don't forget her, I feel like something good came out of it. And I think as an educator and as a performer, that's what it's all about. So when these stories happen and I'm in it and mad and angry, I try to lean in and do what I can to maybe make it a little bit better for someone else or for me in the future or for someone's family member or sibling. Have you ever had someone call you on something that made you want to scream, hit someone with a vehicle, videotape them pooping and post it on the internet? I don't know. Revenge sometimes sounds really nice. Have you ever had that happen? If so, drop the story below. And if you have any questions for me on that day or another day, drop those below too. I'm quarantined, and I left my cute apartment in New York, and I'm now quarantining with my mother and her husband and living in their basement. So I'm going to need something to do. Let's make videos! Hope everyone's staying healthy and not licking doorknobs. I can't come up with anything better.